prime example, but there's other countries that have the same view, is that it can come from anywhere. A janitor has a good idea, you listen to it, right? This is the same thing. I'm not going to go back through the whole story again, but this is the same thing. It doesn't matter where you get a good idea from, right? Good idea. The old saying is, there's a great saying, it goes something like this. It says, a good idea doesn't care who its owner is. Let me say that again. A good idea doesn't care who its owner is. An idea is just an idea. It doesn't make any difference whether it's my idea, or whether it's Sister Rose's idea, or Neat's idea, or Loyal's idea. It doesn't matter, right? It's just a good idea, wherever it came from. Okay? And so this is sort of a valuable kind of insight. Now, there's the challenge that I see with it, and this is not a problem with total quality management, but more a problem with how we run our companies, particularly, again, in the West, but even in some cases in Thailand, in companies that are kind of ran using a Western model. And here's what I'm talking about. For total quality management to work, let's say you take the guy at the top of the organization, the chief executive officer, or the lady at the top of the organization. Okay? So let's say that the chief executive officer is making a certain amount of money, whatever it is. The person at the bottom, if you want them to buy in, let's say a janitor, or let's say in a school, it might be one of the teaching assistants. Or maybe that's probably not, it's probably further down than that, maybe somebody that drives the bus for the kids. Somebody that, when I say the bottom, I'm not talking about people that are on the bottom, I'm talking about lower hierarchy jobs. Okay? Because people are not their jobs. You understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Okay? So, if you have an organization where the person at the top, compared to the person at the bottom, where the income differential is, say, like I believe some studies that were done in the States several years ago, I think it's something like 400 or 500 or 600 to 1 in a lot of American companies. So in other words, if the average person makes, say, $1,000 a month, if that's an average salary for a lower-end worker, then that means that the chief executive officer makes $500,000 a month. Now here's my question. If you're the person making $1,000 a month and the guy at the top makes $500,000, are you going to buy into total quality management? Are you going to believe that you're valued the same way that guy is?
No.
No. It won't work. So the problem is, and Deming talked about this as well, he said your systems, if it's going to work, your systems must match what your objective is. So if you say, we believe that quality can come from anywhere. I believe that the guy who comes in here when I'm done tonight and cleans up may have just as good an idea about education as anybody in here. It might be less likely because he doesn't have the educational background, but it's very possible. If I believe that, should I set up a system whereby somebody at the top of the organization gets paid 500 times or 700 times as much as he does? No. Because what are you saying? You're saying that this person is valued so much more. That's what, when Deming starts talking about systems that have to match. Okay? So for any of these ideas, the systems must match the outcome. If you say value can come from anywhere, then you must value everyone. Does it mean the salaries have to be equal? No, we're not talking about the communist system here. We're not talking about that. But the proportion must be reasonable. Right? So if the bottom person earns $1,000 a month, okay, maybe the top guy can earn $8,000 or $10,000 a month. That's reasonable. But he shouldn't be earning $700,000 or $800,000 a month. That's ridiculous. Okay? So this is the kind of thing that when you start reading and seeing this, you sometimes will say to yourself, wait a minute now, but this doesn't work because, and it doesn't sometimes because of those very issues. It doesn't matter what you say, or remember what I said from Covey. You know, what you do speaks so loudly I can't hear what you're saying, right? Your systems are always, people don't believe what you tell them, they believe what you do. And if I pay somebody in the teaching level, like if I pay Guy $1,000 a month to teach, and I turn around and I say Lakshmi is my manager, and I pay her $60,000 or $70,000 a month, she's not going to believe that I value teachers. I can go on every day and say, you're such a wonderful teacher, you're doing a great job, I love what you're doing, and she'll just kind of look at, hey, whatever. Right? Isn't it true? Okay, you know it's true. Okay? Okay, so we go through sort of a checklist. And we won't talk about all of these, but they are kind of useful. Okay, and it's interesting because many of these questions, they'll come back, you'll see the same issues when you look at it. Organizational structure. Now, central curriculum planning. I don't necessarily agree with all of these questions, because central curriculum planning can be dangerous. If it's central with input from your teachers, it's probably okay. If it's central without input from your teachers, I've seen a lot of schools that do that, and it doesn't work. It does not work. Again, you have to have the buy-in. So you have to remember, it may be central, but you're going to need to get input. Organizational structure for developing curriculums. Let's look at some more of these. Securing citizen input. Look at that one. Look at number 3. Citizen input, which is who? Parents, teachers, and other community members. Okay? You should be drawing in, and it doesn't have to be formal. Sometimes it can be somebody comes in. The feeling has to be, you know, I've worked in schools where parents walk into the classes during the day, and they feel they're totally welcome. Now, there's cases when you may, as a teacher, you may need to control that. Okay, you may need to say, right now we have to go through this, and I kind of need you not to be here. But the issue is that kind of feeling of welcome, of being, oh, it's okay. Guess what? Those schools were schools where there wasn't any problem with getting curriculum changes implemented and so on, because the parents knew what was going on. And the teachers were happy about it. Okay? Let's go down. Does the district require groups developing curriculums to submit specific plans for accomplishing the task, and are those plans monitored? We have to be very careful with monitoring. A lot of these words can be loaded. Okay? Monitoring should be something like, it's kind of like what I do with my boys at home. You know, I got 4-year-old and 5-year-olds. You all know. I've talked to them a few times. Okay? But, you know, monitoring is, if they're at the pool, I know the one, especially Derek, will run away. So I'm watching them play. Now I'm sitting there, sometimes I'm playing with them. Sometimes I'm just kind of relaxing, having my Heineken or whatever, and they're playing. But I never take my eyes off of them 100%. I monitor them. Right? That's monitoring. It doesn't mean that it's like, oh, what did you write on the paper right there? I don't think that's the correct word. What about this word here? That's not monitoring. That's trying to control everything. Micromanagement. There's a big difference. Okay? So you monitor to see that things are going on, and it should be in a helpful way. If you're in curriculum and you're a curriculum director, if you're a teacher, you know, you want somebody to be there to give you a hand. Right? I mean, I worked with a guy, and this person was a wonderful individual in terms of administration, but he worked in several schools with experienced teachers. And he got into a school, this school that I was in at the time, and the teachers were very inexperienced. Okay? And they needed help, because they didn't know exactly what to do. Now some of us, I was a little bit more experienced, some of the others were. We liked to work, this guy was very comfortable to work for, he didn't bother us. And as experienced teachers, we liked that. But the young teachers had a hard time. Okay? Because he didn't give them any direction. He's like, well, you guys know what you're supposed to do. And they're like, actually, we don't, sir. We're new. See, you need to monitor. It means you keep your eye on the situation, especially when people need help, you're giving them help. That's what the type of approach in curriculum, okay, that should be. If people aren't hitting the objectives, you give them help to hit the objectives, rather than beating the heck out of them, okay? Does the board have written policies delineating? That means outlining. Okay? Its role in curriculum development, providing guidance to district educators. This is the American model, okay, where you've got the school board sort of overall in charge, and then the district. The school board is usually part-time, usually elected, almost always elected. Okay? And then the district is now hired staff. They're full-time staff. Okay? And then you get to the school level, where you have the principal, and then the teachers. Okay? So that's what they're talking about there. Written curriculum goals, obviously important. Okay, let's look at some other issues. Let me pass on. Okay, and we will pass some of this. Okay, these, this is sort of, you almost say motherhood or something, it seems obvious, okay? But focus on student learning, of course, right? Everything has to come back to student learning, right? And the next one on there, emphasis on quality, okay? Again, so many of these things come back to what you're doing with your systems. Because if you say, well, I have my focus on student learning, all right? But, I'll give you examples of what schools sometimes do. They say, well, students first, student learning. But then they have, they'll have their buses parked way out on the street. And the little kids have to get off the buses and walk across. And there's all these lanes. I've seen this, okay? And I'm not even necessarily talking about here. I've seen this in the States, in Canada, okay? So you have to go across the dangerous street out of the bus, okay? And the kids are getting afraid of being hit. This is focus on students, right? And then you have that, and then you have what? Well, the principal has a reserved parking space. Right beside the building. And I'm like, focus on student learning, wait a minute. What about the student living first? The student can't learn if they're not alive, right? I'm being a bit ridiculous, but not really, because it all comes back to, saying and doing the same thing. What is it you believe in? Are you following that in what you're doing day to day? Okay? The old saying is where the rubber meets the road, we sometimes say in English. Okay? And that means like if it's a car, right? The rubber meets the road. This is where the real driving happens. This is where it really shows. Okay? And again, people always look at what you're doing. Nobody ever cares what you're saying. Okay? You can say whatever you want, but people look at what you're doing. Right? Even me, okay, I can come up here and say all these wonderful things, and then if a student asks me for help, and I blow them off, right? They're not going to believe what I'm saying anymore. It's not going to have any validity to it, right? It's the same. It works for everything, okay? So these sentiments they're excellent, and they're useful, but remember that always, anywhere you are, you always have to look at what people are doing. And I would say also to advise you, when you look at this as a teacher, because you might say, well, I don't have any choice, but you do have choice. First of all, you have choices in where you decide, in the places that you decide to work in. But also you have choices with how you conduct your own classes. All right? And your choices over the longer term, if you get into an organization which is misaligned, I wouldn't suggest necessarily staying there for the next 20 years. Does that make sense? Because what happens is, I've seen this too. I've seen this in many organizations. You get people that come in and they're fantastic, wonderful people, and they see what's wrong and they try to change it, and then they get frustrated and they give up and they become bitter and angry. And you know what? It's not worth it. Life's too short. So you either have to decide that you can live with what it is and do your best and let go what you can't affect, and that's okay. That's not selling out, that's not giving up, it's not anything. Because you do everything you can do. And you decide that's okay. Or you find somewhere else. Okay? Now I'm not giving people, this is not career advice, but I'm just saying when you look at these different ideas, it always comes back to, does the system, does what you're doing match what you're saying you want? Okay? And it's so important. It's critical in any of these areas. That's why I keep coming back to it. Okay? So let's go on to some of the other ideas. Constancy of purpose. Okay? It's, in our school, our head of special needs, a woman named Karen Sexton. She is fantastic in this whole idea of constancy of purpose. She has meetings with us all the time. Now we're working with kids with learning disabilities and learning difficulties, okay? And she's always saying, okay, when do we need to have a next meeting? And every meeting we talk about the students. What does this student need? What does that student need? How are we serving this student? Is the social grouping working out? Can we get the counselor to look at this student? Does this student need some speech help? Right? It's totally constant. And you can see that. It doesn't matter what other people in the organization are doing, whether they're doing their job or not. But you can see Miss Karen all the time has this constancy of purpose. Curriculum is the same way. A curriculum, it's even more important because you say, well, these are my goals, these are my objectives, this is what we're trying to do. Is it following through the whole organization? Okay? Am I losing? I know I'm going kind of quick. Am I